Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and counsel. Ms. Arias, you are still under oath. Do you understand?
Yes, I do. Thanks.
You may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Arias.
Good morning.
Yesterday when we finished, we were at a point in your life when you were about ready to move in with Matt McCartney. Do you recall?
Yes.
Where we left off? Okay. And yesterday I'd ask you if at this point in time you were boyfriend and girlfriend. And it seemed like you didn't have a definitive answer for that. Is that a label you two didn't use, or?
I don't recall when we made things official, but he wasn't seeing anyone else, and neither was I.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I don't recall when we made it official, our relationship. I mean,
Okay.
It definitely became that way, but I don't remember the exact date or time or circumstance, but
Okay.
we weren't seeing anybody else, just each other.
Okay. So when you moved in together, it was with the idea that this was a monogamous relationship?
Yes,
Okay. And you were working, I believe you told us you got a job at Applebee's, right?
yes.
Okay. And was Matt working?
Yes, he was a manager at Subway.
Okay. Tell us what life was like and how was the relationship? How did he treat you?
I see that period of my life as probably one of the best times in my life. He treated me very well. He was very kind. He was very respectful. He was very spiritual. When I first met him, I was a little bit leery of some of the things he was into. I saw some books on witchcraft, and I thought, but he explained to me that he was just seeking, that he had gone to church most of his life, and he and his family are very much into the Native American culture, and so he asked his pastor about the Native Americans, and he was told they went to hell because they didn't know Jesus Christ. So that turned him off to Christianity, and he decided to explore other religions. So about the time that I met him, he was not practicing Wicca, but he was studying it, and so he had kind of explained it a little bit to me so that I wasn't so, I guess, frightened or suspicious or superstitious maybe of the religion. And so I never practiced it myself, but I think he did prior to us getting together. And by the time I met him, he was sort of moving on to other, like studying Eastern philosophy and Hinduism and Buddhism and that kind of thing too. So,
Okay.
I mean, our relationship took a lot of different spiritual turns and twists.
This might be a good point to back up a little bit in terms of, because you mentioned, and I'll use this word, spirituality or religious beliefs. At the time that you met Matt, where were you spiritually? Was there a particular religion you were a member of? Could you describe that for us?
I was not a member of any denomination. I considered myself Christian. I didn't attend church, and I didn't obey all the commandments that Christianity espouses.
Okay. So when you talked about Matt and the spirituality, did you become more affiliated with his beliefs, or tell us about that?
We sort of explored together and opened up to other beliefs. We began taking meditation seminars, kind of New Age type seminars, but they had their roots in Hinduism or Buddhism. Maybe some kind of like more modern version of transcendentalism, things like that. We just took these little courses and classes, and we would drive to Portland or the Bay Area.
Okay. Was that a big part of your relationship with Matt?
Yes, it was.
This may go without saying because you lived together, but was this also a sexual relationship?
Yes,
Did you love Matt?
very much. Yeah, I was in love with him.
Okay. And this apartment, did you both contribute to the finances of the apartment?
Yes, all of the living expenses were split 50-50.
Okay. And how long did you and Matt live in this apartment?
We lived in that small apartment for about 5 months, and then we moved to Crater Lake, Oregon.
Okay, and why did you move to Crater Lake?
The seasonal work there is in the summer. It's a very high elevation, so the snow stays till about July and comes back in October. So it's a quick season, it's a busy season. So they have staff housing there at the resort, and we got a dorm and stayed there for the season and worked there.
Did you and Matt live together when you were in this
Yes.
dorm, as you described it? Okay.
Yes.
And this point in time, then you're probably several months into your relationship, right?
Yes. At this point, 6 months, I'd say.
I know that probably it's hard to quantify, but was this a serious relationship at this point in time?
Yes, we weren't like heavily discussing marriage, but we were talking about children and what kind of lifestyle we would have if we decided to have a family.
So was marriage on the table, so to speak?
Yeah, it was a future possibility.
Okay. How long in total, in terms of your relationship, were you together with Matt?
I think approximately a year and 8 months.
Okay. In that year and 8 months, did he ever hit you?
No,
Did he ever call you a whore?
no,
A slut?
no,
Three-hole wonder?
no.
What brought the end of your relationship with Matt McCartney?
Well, after the first season at Crater Lake, we came back, and ironically, the same exact apartment opened up again, so we rented the same place where we lived prior to that. We stayed there for some months, and we began to sort of argue over little things. It wasn't anything serious, but it wore on our relationship because it just made things not so enjoyable. So we decided to take a breather from each other. Well, not from each other, but just from our living together. So he went back to Crater Lake for a season, and this time I did not go. I moved to Ashland, which is about 15 minutes south of Medford. It's in Oregon also.
And let me ask you, before you go any further, these arguments that you spoke, you would have little arguments or things would get uncomfortable. Describe what you mean by little arguments, because that could mean a lot of different things to different people. Was there screaming? Was there throwing things?
No, nothing like that. It was more like nagging, like he would leave his clothes everywhere, and I would be like, and what else? Sometimes I would leave a dish somewhere in the living room if we were eating, and so it was kind of like more about housekeeping and that sort of thing, just living together and those
but
dynamics.
the fights themselves didn't get volatile, from what you're telling us, right?
No, they weren't.
Okay. Now you're talking about this period in time. You're starting to have some discord in your relationship. Tell us how that discord leads to the end of the relationship.
Well, we decided to spend a little time apart. We saw each other on our weekends. He would come into town in Ashland and stay with me. And I remember I was with his dad's girlfriend, and she was trying to, I had felt sort of like we were distancing, but I was hanging out with, I can't remember her name, but his dad's girlfriend at the time. And we were trying to download pictures onto his dad's hard drive. And on the desktop, there were some other pictures of this girl. And I didn't recognize her, but I recognized the setting, and it was inside the lodge at Crater Lake. And so the date was also current with this season, which would have been 2001. But it was just labeled with, I guess, an initial, the letter B. So I didn't know who she was, but I wasn't overly concerned about it. But, I just kind of had a feeling. And so I let that go. And a few weeks later, I was working at Applebee's. And I was walking past the table, and two people said, "Hi, Jodi," and I stopped, and I didn't recognize them, and they explained that they worked with Matt at Crater Lake, and they were just in town for their days off. And I just said hi and, checked on them later as they were about to leave, and they said we took a vote and think you should know something. And they told me that he was seeing a girl named Bianca at Crater Lake. And so that explained the initial B on that photo. And I kind of said, well, does she have dark hair? And he said, yes. And so I figured it was her.
Let me ask you this. What did you do when you had this information?
I was reeling because, I mean, of all the boyfriends I had, I would have expected him to not be the one that cheated on me. He was very loyal. I trusted him completely, like implicitly. He could have said the sky is falling and I would have believed him. I think I would have just looked out the window to see what it looks like. But I asked my boss if I could go home a little early and he said that was fine. So I think I was let go. It was slow. I was let go around 7.
And just so we're clear, you were living with Matt at the time?
No, he was living at Crater Lake and I was living in Ashland.
Okay.
So I went home, I changed my clothes, and I decided to, at this time though, this night, Matt was in Borrego Springs, California, looking
And
for
how
more.
far was that from where you were?
Very far. It's almost by the border, and Ashland is up by the other Californian border, the northern border.
Okay. So did you call Matt?
No, neither of us had cell phones at that time.
Okay. So what did you do once you went home early and learned of this information?
Well, I decided that I wanted to find out if it was true. So it wasn't very late. It's about an 1.5 hour drive to Crater Lake. So after getting dressed, I drove up to Crater Lake to see if I could find out. I had friends that were still there, and the people that told me this I didn't know. So I wanted to find out from them. And there were 2 dormitories there. So I went to the one that's closest to the lodge, because that one was where people would hang out. And so I could find some people that I knew. And I ran into a guy, I think his name was Steve. And I asked him.
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained. Are any of the jurors having trouble hearing? Is anyone having trouble hearing? I understand that you reported to the bailiff earlier that you had difficulty yesterday. Anyone who cannot hear today? If at any time you cannot hear, please raise your hand and let me know immediately. All right, you may continue.
Okay, Jodi, you were in the process of telling us you're going to Crater Lake to find out whether or not Matt was being unfaithful to you.
Right. I didn't want to continue in the relationship if that was the case. If it wasn't the case, then of course I would, because I loved him.
Did you find out that information? Were you able to confirm it or
Yes.
or dispel it? And how did you do that?
I knocked on Bianca's door, and Steve had run to warn her, so I could hear them talking, and he was very frantic. How do I say this? Well, he's gay, so he kind of he exaggerates, he's very emotional, and he's very animated, and so it kind of made me chuckle, because he sounded very funny. And I could tell they were nervous. So she opened the door and I said, "Hi, are you Bianca?" And she said, "Yeah." So she invited me in because she knew who I was. And so we sat down. There were 2 beds in this dorm. She was staying with another relative. They were both from Romania and they were here for seasonal work. So she sat on her bed, I sat on the other bed, and we just talked for about an 1.5 hours. Maybe not quite that long, maybe an hour. And she just told me that she started.
Objection, hearsay.
Based on this conversation, were you able to confirm the idea that Matt McCartney and Bianca were having an affair?
Yes. Well, yes, they were together.
Okay. Now, in this 1.5 hour conversation, were you yelling at her?
No, it was just chit chat, actually. I mean, I was trying not to freak out or cry or get upset, because she had no idea. She was under the impression that he and I were no longer together, so that I didn't look at this as her fault.
How did it feel when you had this information confirmed?
I didn't really allow myself to have much emotion about it until I left her presence, and at that point I allowed myself to cry.
And where were you at this point? Had you gone back home, or this like out in the parking lot?
Well, at this point, it was really late, so I ended up crashing in my friend Eddie's dorm, and he was kind of a family friend. His family is from Wairika. He's friends with Matt, he's friends with me. His father also owned a local restaurant, so we all knew each other. So Eddie said, you can sleep here, and there were 2 beds in that dorm. And so I crashed there until about sunrise, and then I got up and drove back to Medford.
And at this point in time, when you're driving back to Medford, have you talked to Matt?
No.
When you go back to Medford, what do you do?
I don't remember the sequence of order, but I also confronted Matt, and he confirmed it. And at that point, he was honest about it.
Well, let me ask you this. You say this confrontation. Was Matt back in Medford when you got there?
He came back, but I don't remember if he was there the day that I got back from Crater Lake or if he came the next day or whenever.
Okay. And what do you mean by confrontation?
I went over to his dad's house. I knew the day he was getting back. And he was on the phone with Bianca when I came over, and he's hung up and he said, I know what you want to talk about. And so we left the house and went to my car, so that his dad wasn't privy to the information, because I think Matt was very embarrassed about it. So we just talked about it, and basically our relationship was over, and it was kind of sad.
Okay. And when was this again, time-wise?
This would have been September. It was right before September 11th, so it was in 2001. I just remember that.
And was this a heated confrontation or just a
No, it wasn't heated. It was just emotional. We were both crying.
Okay. And this time in September of 2001, was that the last time you saw Matt McCartney?
No.
Tell us what happened after you guys, I guess, broke up in September 2001. What happened with your relationship?
I wanted to leave the area because Matt and I had a lot of experiences, mostly all good, in that whole Southern Oregon area. All those towns, Crater Lake, that entire area. So it was just every corner that I drove and turned, it was sentimental. So I wanted to leave. So there was a martial arts instructor that I knew, Matt and I knew, and he said that
Sustained.
Without telling us anybody what said, what steps did you take in your life next?
he referred me to another place of employment in Big Sur, California.
Okay. And where was that?
Big Sur, California is also in Monterey County, like Salinas. I'd never been there all the years I lived in Salinas. It's south of Carmel, about 28 miles.
And was there a particular resort?
Yes.
What was that?
The resort is called, or it was called, I think it's still called Ventana Inn and Spa.
Now, was that the resort where you met Daryl Brewer?
Yes.
Okay. You applied for a job and were interviewed by Daryl Brewer, is that right?
Yes. I
Okay.
was.
Tell us about that period in your life, what you were doing, how you were living.
Well, I drove down there and interviewed with Daryl. It was in the afternoon. I was a little apprehensive about moving all the way out there. There was no place to live. There was staff housing at that resort as well, but nothing was open or available at that time. I was told that when there is an overflow of employees, they are allowed to use the campground if there are open lots, because this was in October now. I think my interview was actually on October 20th because I remember it was Matt's birthday. So during that time, that's a slow season in Big Sur, or things are slowing down. So the campground was mostly all open. So I was thinking of trading in my car to get a trailer, but I wasn't really in a financial position to do that. So when Daryl hired me, I kind of scrambled around and went to an outdoor supply store and bought some equipment. And when Matt heard about what I was doing, he was also looking for work. The position he sought at Borrego Springs didn't pan out, and so he came down to Big Sur and also applied at Ventana.
Okay, so let me understand this as it relates to Matt McCartney. You said that the breakup conversation wasn't the last time you talked. It sounds to me like you maintained a relationship with him after you broke up. Is that correct?
Yes, there was a period after we broke up when we didn't talk for about a week, and then maybe a couple more. We would say hi briefly on the phone and then not talk again, because it was just, our feelings were tender, and it was just kind of a sticky situation. He was really ashamed of his behavior. I think his mother had shamed him a little. But eventually we began to talk again, if that makes sense.
Okay. And when he, just so we're clear too, you talked about him, or I guess he was going to live with you in this tent, right?
Yes, he was.
Okay. And just so we're clear, was this the rekindling of the romance, so to speak?
Not really. I mean, there were blurred boundaries because we were familiar with each other, comfortable with each other. We weren't actively trying to rekindle a relationship, but there was still a lot of sentimentality.
Okay. Were you still sexual with him at this point in time?
One time. We had sex one more time after we broke up.
Okay. After that, then it was merely platonic.
I considered it platonic. I still had some feelings for him, but we were not really together, and we were just friends at that point. I got actually 2 weeks after living in the tent, I secured employee housing, and I think he stayed in the tent for some time, and then he got employee housing also.
Now, what was your job at this resort? What did Mr. Brewer initially hire you to do?
Initially, I started as just a server in the restaurant. There's a restaurant at Ventana.
Okay. And describe this restaurant for us. I mean, is this a equivalent of Denny's or just?
No, it's considered classified as fine dining. It was once rated 4 stars by Mobile Resorts. It had been featured in Condé Nast Traveler and all kinds of different publications. It had a lot of accolades, and it's kind of a resort where high-profile celebrities and things would go to just to be private and get away from things. So our guests were treated discreetly, and
Okay. Well, as far as jobs go, was this you talked about you had a career waiting tables at Denny's and Purple Plum and all these places. Was this one of the better paying jobs you've had?
as far as, well, most servers work for the tips, so as far as that goes, it was better paying. There was also a bigger tip out though. So when you have a position like that, it's not just you taking orders and delivering food. You have a lot of help, different people that make the restaurant run smoothly, and so you have a lot of different people, such as the bartender, the hostess, the busser that you tip out. So even though the tip pool was huge at the end, after the tip out, I was still walking away with more than at Applebee's. So it was nicer.
Okay. And how long did you remain a server with Ventana?
I think I was there 3.5 years.
Was that your only position within the resort?
No, the following summer in 2002, the wedding coordinator, her name was Arlene Murillo, she was having stomach pains that she had been ignoring for several months. And she finally went to the doctor and found out she had pancreatic cancer, and she passed away within a month. So I filled her position temporarily until they could find a more permanent replacement for wedding coordinator.
And you were acting as wedding coordinator, is that
Yes.
right? Okay. And what did that involve?
It involved working with the brides and grooms and how they wanted their reception and their ceremonies set up. There are a few wedding sites at Ventana, and just negotiating the cost with them and returning phone calls, emails, sending out wedding packages for inquiries.
And were you, at this point in time when you were wedding coordinator, were you in a relationship with Daryl Brewer?
No.
Tell us, you've talked about October 2001, you go to Ventana, you're hired by Mr. Brewer. Tell us about how that relationship evolved.
During that summer, well, in May, right prior to the summer, the restaurant, it was called Cielo at the time, it closed for remodeling. And so we moved the entire restaurant operation over to the inn. And I helped out with that, and Daryl was heavily involved with that. So we were working closely together, and then also with the wedding coordinating position. We worked more closely together. So I began to sort of develop a crush on him, but he was my boss, so I didn't ever let that on. And then at one point, he pulled me aside and said, I'm going to resign from my position tonight at, I think it was called the briefing. I think it was some kind of meeting we had before the shift started. So he wanted to let me know that so it wasn't like a shock. I think he let a few other managers know ahead of time.
And how many months were you working with Mr. Brewer before, to your recollection, before he told you he was going to resign his position?
Well, I would have been working with him from the day I was hired, so about a year.
Okay. And but at that point in time, it was merely a working relationship? Was it a friendship?
I wouldn't even call it a friendship. We kept that separate. We never fraternized or anything like that. We just worked together.
Okay. So he's advising you that he is changing positions. Do you begin dating then, or just describe that for us?
No, after he stepped down from his management position, he stepped into a supervisory role. So I still didn't, make any moves, or he didn't express anything, and I didn't express anything. But then he decided he was going to step out of that role too. And prior to actually doing that, we had a conversation where we sort of discovered our mutual interest in each other, but we still didn't do anything because he was still technically my supervisor. And about a week later, he stepped out of that position and we went on a date.
Okay. Now, at that point in time, how old are you in 2001 or two? I guess we're talking about 2002 now, right?
Yeah, I was 22.
Okay. And how old was Mr. Brewer?
He was 42.
Okay. How did you feel about dating someone that much your senior?
I wasn't so much concerned about dating him as I was concerned about how other people might view it. I found Daryl very attractive. He was tall, he was, handsome, beautiful eyes, that kind of thing. We were very compatible, our personalities. I don't know, I kind of saw him as like a George Clooney type, like he's older but attractive. And we had a lot of similar interests. So I think he was more concerned about the age gap than I was, because he was also concerned about how people might view him for dating somebody so young.
When you began dating him, did you know of did you know he had a son?
Yes, I had seen him a few times at the restaurant.
Okay. And did you know that he was divorced?
Yes.
And all those things were okay with you?
It wasn't how I envisioned it, but I guess you can't always control where your heart's going to go. There were things I discovered about him after the fact that he kept very private that I didn't care for, but I already loved him, so I accepted those things.
Okay. Well, before we start talking about those things, let's talk about the evolution of the relationship from that first date. Mm-hmm. You're still living in staff housing, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Just kind of take us through the process of other dates, how the relationship evolved, that sort of thing.
Okay. As soon as he stepped down from the supervisory position, we went to San Francisco and went to a 49er game. We're both 49er fanatics, being from that area. We just kind of toured the city a little, not like a whole bunch of touring, but we walked around Union Square. Being in that business, other people that are in the business, so we got a great deal on a hotel room right near Union Square, and It was a good trip. We just continued to do that. I began to come over and hang out on our days off while his son was there. So he got a little more used to me. He was very shy when he was younger. I think I came into his life when he was about 4, 3.5, 4.
Okay. Was Daryl living in staff housing as well?
Yes.
Okay. And you're working together at this time as well?
Yes, he actually became a server. So we're both kind of equal as far as our positions go.
Okay. Do you recall how big a staff there was, and at least among the waiters and waitresses there?
Off the top of my head, I'd say maybe 20 people, as far as just the servers.
Okay. Lots of women employed there as well?
There were maybe 7 other women, I think.
Were you, at any point in time, in terms of Daryl's interaction with women where you were dating, did you get jealous? Did you get angry at him?
At him, no, I didn't.
Now, you go on these dates, you're both living in staff housing. We heard about the home you bought together. When did you buy that home?
We bought the house in 2005. I think we closed in June 2005.
Prior to buying that home, what happened we were talking about 2002, you're dating, you're both living in staff housing. Do you live together before you buy that house? Yourself and Daryl?
No, we had separate apartments. At that point, he had moved back to Monterey, and I had quit Ventana and moved to Monterey as well. And we were working in separate jobs, separate apartments.
Okay. And this was in Monterey?
Yes.
Okay. And you were still would there be a point in time when you say that you and Mr. Brewer were in a monogamous relationship, whatever we call boyfriend-girlfriend, was there a point in time when that occurred?
Yes, I don't remember the exact point in time, but we were either in San Francisco on at one of the games, or I can't remember. We celebrated as soon as he was out of his supervisory role. We celebrated and decided to make things official around that time.
Okay.
He was a little nervous about it. He didn't want to get married, so he made that very clear right off the
Okay.
bat.
Right off the bat, he told
Yeah.
you he didn't want to get married.
Yeah, he made his intentions very clear that he liked me and he was attracted to me and he was okay with being with me, but he said, I don't see myself getting married again.
How did that sit with you?
I was young at the time, so it didn't bother me. I figured I still have many years left and I enjoyed being with him, so that's what I did. I just enjoyed the time we had together.
Okay. And you said just a few moments ago, you said eventually you got to the point where you fell in love with Daryl.
Yes.
Is there a moment in time, or is there a point in time that you can describe for us where you knew that was the case?
I don't remember the case, the exact moment. It was a gradual process. My crush just became more and more, and then I began to really love his son, and we progressed in that regard.
I asked because you said you got to a certain point where you're in love with him, but there were all these flaws or things that you had to overlook.
Yes.
Once you were in love with him.
Yes.
Could you describe for us what you mean by what you were overlooking, at least from your perspective?
I discovered after I had already developed some deep feelings for him that he was a smoker. He didn't advertise that. I never saw him smoking. So that was, the only thing it bummed me out about is that his health. I thought, okay, it's going to affect his health. He didn't ever smell like smoke. I never knew it. So he had very good hygiene, but I was concerned about his health. And I also, he admitted to me one day that he was an alcoholic.
And those were the two big things that were troubling to you?
Yes, they were. I didn't ever want to, I didn't see myself being with a smoker. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but it wasn't a lifestyle that I wanted. My grandparents were chain smokers for a long time, and I saw how it affected their health very negatively until they finally quit. And I didn't want, I don't know, just didn't want that kind of lifestyle.
What about the alcoholism? Did that manifest itself during the relationship?
I didn't notice it until after he really talked about it. We would hang out, we would watch football during football season, and we would have dinner at his house. He was a very good cook. And I would notice after dinner, he would take some Stoli out of the fridge, or it was Smirnoff, I think, out of the freezer, and he would pour himself a drink, and okay, you know, whatever, he's just relaxing. But as the hours would go on, I would go back into the kitchen to throw something away, and there was an entire empty 6-pack of Sierra Nevada, and so I didn't see him drink it, and he wasn't changing his behavior. He was the same, so I didn't assume anything really. But when he told me about it, one day he was very troubled over it and was trying to overcome it.
So despite these, you said, you know, you were in love with him. Before you buy the house, you're both living in separate apartments in Monterey, right?
Yes.
Okay. And where are you working?
I was working at an Italian restaurant called Piatti, and also California Pizza Kitchen had opened a restaurant there at their mall. And so I helped open that restaurant, and I was tending bar there.
And to your recollection, where was Daryl working?
Where was he working? I don't know why, I can't remember. I think he was working in Pebble Beach, at a resort in Pebble Beach at the time.
Tell us about the thinking behind the two of you deciding to purchase a home together.
Well, I saw myself eventually becoming a real estate investor. That's what I sort of wanted to do career-wise. And obviously the housing market was taking off in 2005. So I wanted to buy a home and sit on it for a while. And I had good credit, but I didn't have quite the income required for that. So I began talking to Daryl about it, and he also really wanted to buy a home. The Monterey Peninsula was way out of our reach. At that time, like a dirt lot was going for $700,000. So there was no way we were able to purchase property in that area at the time. Also, I should probably mention he stopped drinking. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have considered that. So he's been sober since 2004. So we decided to talk about buying a house together, and his ex-wife was moving to La Quinta, California, which is in Riverside County, I think. And it's right near Palm Desert. So we began making plans to move to Sacramento since she was moving. We wanted to buy a home, but we wanted to stay nearer to Monterey and not come all the way down to the desert.
You said you wanted to become involved in the real estate market. Did you do anything besides just look at purchasing a home? Did you educate yourself, anything of that nature?
Yes, I took real estate classes at Monterey Peninsula College just to become more familiarized with the process of real estate economics, and I don't remember all the other title of the class I took, but it involved real estate. So I took those at the same time I was taking more semesters of Spanish, and began studying it and just paying more attention to real estate market trends and looking at listings and things like that.
Okay. One of the things we spoke about earlier was, all throughout high school, that you had an interest in art, photography, different mediums of art. Was that a business that you were interested in this time, or were you more focused on the real estate business?
It was a business that I saw myself developing, but I wasn't actively, at that point in my life, I wasn't actively trying to start like a company or anything. I was trying to start a real estate company.
Were you still painting and drawing and,
Occasionally, I didn't, it's very time consuming, so I didn't take a lot of time out of my schedule to do that, but every now and then I did. For not Valentine's Day, for Father's Day, I gave Daryl a portrait of his son, and he really liked it.
did it, purchasing the home at this point in time, do you remember how much that home cost?
I believe it was 350,000.
And did you and Mr. Brewer have to put down a sizable down payment in order to buy that house?
I think, I can't remember if we put money down, but it was one of those, I think it was 100% financed, interest only kind of thing.
Okay. What was your financial situation at that point in time when you were buying that house?
I was in a pretty solid financial position. I had a lot of money in the bank saved. Well, by a lot, I mean about 10 or 12,000. Which I think at that point in my life was the most I'd saved ever. And I had very good credit. Daryl had good credit. He had, I think, a Roth IRA or something that he was also, saving for retirement. So he was invested as well.
Okay. So when did you, if you can recall, when did you move into the home? When did you close on the house?
I believe it was June 2005 that we were actually going to move to Sacramento, and we were looking around the area there. So we made an offer on a house in Fair Oaks, which is a city right outside of Sacramento. And the owners accepted our offer. We checked out the house. We really liked it. And the day after our offer was accepted, the plan was we were going to take his son and keep him full-time, and he would visit his mother in La Quinta. And so the day after our offer was accepted, she decided that she wanted him to come live with her and continue the same custody agreement. So at that point, the Sacramento area wasn't feasible anymore for Daryl, and I wasn't able to buy a house without him. And of course, I wanted to be with him because we were still together. So
just so we're clear too, she is, in this story, she is Daryl's ex-wife, right?
Yes.
Jack's mother.
Jack's mother.
Okay.
So I came over to his house the day after. We're just really high on the fact that we're going to get a house, and we're excited. And he was just hanging up the phone, and he said, I don't remember what he said, but he was, sorry.
Well, Jodi, why don't we talk about the point in time then you make this offer in this house near Sacramento. You don't get that. Tell us how you wind up in the house that you wound up in.
Well, we decided that he needed to be nearer to his son. So we checked out schools and real estate prices in Palm Desert, which was more affordable than La Quinta. La Quinta is more a high-end community with more expensive property. In Palm Desert, there was a very good school district, and there were neighborhoods that had houses within our price range that were in that school district. So we made an offer on a house that I had seen online that I really liked.
Okay. So when you say really liked, was this just from a personal perspective or also from a business perspective?
I guess from the business perspective, because it was within our price range, and a personal perspective because just judging from the picture of the house, it looked like a house that I could see myself living in. Of course, we needed to see it in person first, but.
Okay. So when did you close and move into this house in Palm Desert?
We finally moved there in the summer, 2005.
And in terms of the situation, how big was this house?
The house was, I can't remember the square footage, somewhere around 1,400, maybe 1,500. It had 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, an open floor plan with the living room, dining area, and kitchen. It had a pool in the back, fruit trees, mature landscaping, palm trees, a front yard.
What was the living situation in terms of the bedrooms? Did you and Daryl share one? Describe that bit of it for us.
We had, well, I had my bed, he had his bed, so we moved them both in, and I kind of kept the master bedroom sort of as my own space, and he had another bedroom that he kind of, like when he came home from work, he would call it his cave time. He needed about 45 minutes to just decompress, and he kind of just vegged out in front of CNN or something like that. And then after that, we would just sort of hang out.
Did Jack have a bedroom as well?
Yes, Jack had the other bedroom.
And how often did Jack live with the two of you?
He came on the weekends, 2 to 3 days a week.
And from your perspective, do you feel like you had a good relationship with Jack?
Yeah, we grew closer after moving to Palm Desert. Yeah, I did. I had a good relationship. It wasn't like a motherly kind of role. It was more like, I guess, having grown up with younger siblings, Jack felt more like a little brother to me.
And your relationship with Daryl at this point in time in 2006, or 2005, excuse me, when you moved into this home, what was the status of your romantic relationship with Daryl?
We were boyfriend-girlfriend. We were in a committed monogamous relationship, not necessarily headed for marriage, but I was in love with him.
You say not necessarily headed for marriage. Had Daryl's perspective, as you saw it, did that change from that initial advisement, I guess, that he gave you a couple years prior?
I was not under any impression that he had changed his mind about his position on marriage.
Okay. Do you want to take a break now?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will take a noon recess at this time. Please be back in the designated area at 1:25. Please remember the admonition. Have a nice lunch. You are excused.
Please stand for the jury.
Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and counsel. Mr. Nurmi, you may continue with direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Jodi, before we took our lunch break, I believe we were talking about a point in time when you and Daryl had purchased your home in Palm Desert. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And you had also told us that Daryl's stance on not being married persisted all the way to the point in time when you were buying this home, right?
Yes, I think there was a time when he may have wanted another child. He implied that, but we never actively tried to get pregnant or anything like that.
Okay. So given that Mr. Brewer was not interested in getting married and you had your separate lives, your separate bank accounts, that you got the mortgage together, what was the plan on purchasing this home? Were you going to live in it for years? What was the idea?
Ideally, if everything had worked out and if the housing market had continued to increase, which of course it didn't, I think June was the year it peaked, or the month it peaked, then we would have stayed in it for 2 years and either rented it out or flipped it, sold it and tried to reinvest in another house.
So you didn't have a plan to be permanently together, whether married or not, you and Daryl?
No, actually, I had hoped to maybe buy him out on the house, if possible, so that I could own it. And then I had ideas of maybe making it into a business investment property.
Okay. At this point in time, were you still in love with Mr. Brewer?
You mean while we owned the house together?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Did you want to marry Daryl Brewer?
I probably would have, I would have married him. I don't know that, he was pretty clear that he didn't want to get married, so I didn't allow myself to entertain that idea, but I could see myself spending my life with him.
So as it relates to this period, this plan that was hatched, I guess, or actualized in 2005 to buy the house and stay together in it for a couple of years and make money. Did that plan work?
No, it didn't work at all.
Why not? What happened?
The day before we signed on our house, our mortgage broker called and switched up the terms, and she said it really fast, and we were like, okay, whatever, we just really wanted the house. So what we failed to remember or consider was that in 1 year, the mortgage would index with the current rate, and so our mortgage payment jumped from $2,200 a month up to $2,800 a month, and it was a lot more than we were expecting.
And were you still working 2 jobs?
Yes, I was working 2 jobs, yes, in Palm Desert.
Okay. So your half of the mortgage then would have been $1,400, right?
Yes.
Okay. And that didn't include any of the other household expenses?
No other bills, just the mortgage alone was that.
Okay. And were you, between these 2 jobs, were you making the kind of money that you could afford that sort of payment?
I think I might have been able to. I would have been, I think, living very impoverished if it didn't quite cover the mortgage. I came up short every month.
So how did you keep paying the mortgage?
I was hoping to earn more money or get another job, but what I did in the meantime, assuming that I would be able to pay it back, is I started paying the mortgage with my credit cards.
Was the value of the home, what was happening with that?
The value obviously wasn't increasing anymore. I didn't really look into the value of the home I was living in, but I was paying attention to sale prices in my neighborhood, and they were going for almost $100,000 less at this point than what we closed on our home for. So it was pretty apparent that the market was kind of switching back to a buyer's market.
And how long were you and Daryl able to maintain the home with this increased mortgage payment?
I can't remember exactly when it mortgaged, but it went south pretty quickly as far as being able to maintain the payments. I think the last the full half of payment that I made was in November 2006. And then by December, I couldn't quite get to $1,400. And then by January, I couldn't pay. I think I paid even less. And I think that was the last time I was able to even attempt it. And so by then we decided we were going to just let the property lapse into foreclosure.
Okay. Moving back a few months to the fall of 2006, what was going on with your relationship with Mr. Brewer? Were you still happy, or describe that for us?
Well, I still loved him, but I think that summer I had a lot of things, just kind of reality hit. We weren't really progressing in our relationship. I was no longer 22, I was 26 now, so I began to question, where I was going with my life. Was I going to have a family with this person? And so it really didn't seem that way. And at the time, my goal was marriage and children, at least someday. And that's not something you can just go out and get, something you have to kind of invest time in. And so at age 26, I was more than halfway through my 20s, and I wanted to begin focusing more on that. But we had the house together, so I wasn't sure how that was going to work. So I became, I guess, a little more disenchanted with the relationship. He wasn't really focused on it. He had a lot of stress going on with his life and his bills and his son and his ex-wife and that kind of thing. So we were going in different directions. We had different visions for our futures.
You mentioned personally the things you wanted on a personal level. But you had also talked about this home purchase being a business venture for you, obviously one that wasn't doing so well, right?
Yes.
Did you have other ideas in mind with what you wanted to do with your life from a professional standpoint?
Well, I was looking for other ways to get on my feet financially so that I could so that I could invest in real estate, which was going to be a main form of my income, so I could do other things that I enjoy, which would also be forms of income, such as photography. And I didn't see myself yet making a career out of art, but it was more a hobby than a career goal, but possibly that. And I wanted to get my art into galleries. I enjoyed the weddings that I had done at Ventana, but I enjoyed photography more than coordinating them, so I wanted to become a wedding photographer also.
Now, before we go any further into some of your ventures, we talked about a little bit throughout the course of your life, you call it your spiritual or religious thinking. You talked about your 2 prior boyfriends. At this point in time in the fall of 2006, where was your thinking spiritually, religiously?
At that time, I considered myself very open-minded spiritually as far as religions go. I find good things in all kinds of religions, and truths in all religions are things that resonate with me. And so I didn't have a particular or specific religion that I was identified with, or that I considered to be my religion. It was kind of open and broad, but I still considered myself spiritual.
Okay. Now, you mentioned looking for a financial mechanism, if you will, to allow you to make money while you worked on your art and your photography, that sort of thing, right?
Yes.
Did you find one of those, or what you thought was one of those?
Yes, the year before, I went to work at California Pizza Kitchen one day, and my manager asked me where I saw myself in 5 years, and the first thought that jumped into my mind was real estate, something involving real estate. I think I mentioned that. He said he was going to be retired, which I thought was kind of a bold statement because he's about my age. And so he gave me some information, and it was the company that was then called Prepaid Legal. I think there was a magazine and a DVD, and he was really excited about it. And I thought, okay, well, he asked me to look at it, review it, and I told him I would. But it wasn't anything that really got me excited. And initially, I took it, that day at work, I put it next to one of the computer terminals, and I forgot about it, and it stayed at work for several weeks, almost a month, before I remembered to finally take it home.
Okay. Did you watch that DVD?
Not at that point. I took it home. I never looked at it. Well, not never. I didn't look at it for a long time. It went into a closet, just a storage closet. And about 6 months later, maybe 5 months later, I was cleaning it out. I was just cleaning things out, and I came across the DVD, and I wanted to throw it away, but I didn't want to throw it away before I at least knew what was on it. So I stopped what I was doing. I popped it into the DVD player and sat down and just gave it my attention for that time so that I could at least throw it away knowing that I knew what was on it before I threw it away. And I just liked what I saw, and so I called him back. And
Called who back?
the person who gave it to me, I called him back. He said he wasn't in the business anymore, but he could refer me to his upline, and so I got his number, and then I called that guy. And he told me he wasn't in the business anymore, but that he would still get me some more material on it. And so I waited a few days and didn't hear back from him. So I finally just went to Prepaid Legal's website and submitted my information to get more information about it. I think I was able to sign up on the website. No, I don't think I signed up then, but I submitted my information, and a lady named Michelle finally called me back.
And this lady named Michelle that called you back, did you know her?
No,
Prior
I
to
didn't.
her call?
Not prior.
Okay. Was this someone who was and you were in Palm Desert at the time that you made this call, right?
Yes.
Okay. And this Michelle, was she in your area?
She was, I think what happens is when you submit information, at least this is how it used to be, you submit your phone number, or maybe by zip code or phone number, the referral goes to somebody within your area. So she's in the same area code as I am, but a different city. She lived in Hemet.
Okay. Did you meet with her, or tell us how
She
that?
called me. She was actually at one of the conventions. It was March 2006 that I went onto the computer. And during a break, she checked her email and she got notice of my information and called me right away and told me where to go to sign up. So I went online and I signed up. And when she came back from convention, we decided to meet at a restaurant. I think it was in Palm Desert or somewhere halfway.
Well, let's before you get too far, what do you mean by you signed up?
I didn't know what that meant at the time, but she just instructed me to go online, purchase the membership, and then also pay the fee to become an independent associate with the company.
Okay, so you bought their product and then you pay an additional fee to sell the product,
Yes.
right? That's what being an associate means, to be able to sell the product?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And why was it that you were interested at this point in time of becoming an associate of this company?
I liked what I saw on the DVD. It was presented very well by two executives in the company that have had a lot of success and are very eloquent, and they were able to explain it in very simple terms with simple math, and it just seemed like something that was that I might have success with.
Okay. So you meet this individual, and are you then involved in selling the product as well, or how do you get involved in that?
Well, she sent me away with tons of supplies, DVDs to pass out to other people, magazines, marketing materials, and I really didn't do anything with it. I just took it home and it sat there and collected dust for a while.
And home, were you still living with Mr. Brewer at that time?
Yes.
And were you still in a boyfriend-girlfriend type relationship at that time?
Yes.
Okay. And just, I keep saying at that time, do you know about what month and year we're talking about?
Well, I was still in March 2006 at this time when I took
Okay.
things home, and like end of March, because she was at the convention and then she came back.
Okay. So these materials, you're telling us they sit. Were you actively trying to sell memberships? What were you doing in regards to prepaid legal?
Not at that point. She had called me in the summer. There was a team event at Daniel Summit, Utah, and it was scheduled at the beginning of July that year, and I was scheduled to go to my cousin's wedding, and I wanted to build my wedding portfolio, so that was much more important to me, obviously, and to be with my family for that event. So I didn't go to I didn't go to the company event that she invited me to, but I went to my cousin's wedding, and then the summer went by, and she called me in early August and asked if I had bought my ticket for the convention, which occurred in September. And I told her I had not, and she was very adamant that I go. And she told me, you know, you can carpool with us. It's Las Vegas. It's not a far drive. So kind of at her behest, I bought the ticket reluctantly.
Okay. In September 2006, were you talked about working 2 different jobs to pay the mortgage, that sort of thing. Was that going on in September of 2006 still?
Yes, I was going to go back to work at Pisto. They closed for the summer for a few months, and the owners leave the desert. They go up to Monterey, actually. And then it reopens mid-September, or maybe it's early September, whenever school starts there, because he had children. So around that time, the restaurant reopens, and I still had my position.
Okay. You also talked earlier, I guess, about the time that you purchased the house, you had $10,000 to $12,000 in the bank. Was that money still in the bank in September 2006?
No, that money was long gone.
Okay. So what is your financial situation in September 2006?
It's paycheck to paycheck, struggling. I mean, we're not out on the street or anything, but I gave up all of the extra things that I liked, Starbucks, just things like that, just little things that would chip away at your monthly income. Everything was very sparse. Just whatever we could make ends meet.
And your relationship with Mr. Brewer, Is this still going fine, or are we still at this dead end that you were describing earlier?
It was something I sort of dreaded because I knew it wasn't going to last, but we hadn't discussed it. I don't know where he was with things. I figured he was kind of in the same realm. I didn't realize his feelings were as deep for me as he said when he was on the stand. We had that conversation about a year later, about 8 months afterward, where he told me that, which surprised me. I just kind of figured he was in another place and I was in another place.
Okay. So you purchased this ticket for this convention, and this was in Las Vegas?
Yes.
Okay. Was there a specific location for this event?
Yes, it was held at the MGM Grand.
So do you then, did you go to this convention?
Yes.
Okay, and how did you get there?
I drove to Hemet and parked my car at Michelle's house, and we took her. She had a brand new Honda Accord, so it was real spacious, and she and Lenore and I all drove the three of us carpooled to Las Vegas.
Okay. And you mentioned this person, Lenore. Was this a friend of yours or a stranger to you at the time?
She became a friend. That was the first day I'd met her, and she was also a recruit of Michelle's.
Okay. So you go off to Las Vegas, and these people are virtually strangers to you. Is that what I'm hearing?
Michelle and I would talk occasionally and text. I was comfortable around her. She was almost my mother's age, maybe slightly younger. So I was comfortable around her, but I didn't know her very well.
And to this point in time, it sounds like you hadn't been active in the company at all. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Other than buying a membership?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
true.
All right.
I wasn't really looking forward to going, but I figured I should give it an honest shot.
Okay. Did you know anyone else that was going to be at this convention besides your two companions?
I'm sorry?
Did you know anyone else at this convention besides the people you were traveling there with?
No.
Okay. Well, tell us about what happened when you arrived there.
When we arrived, we checked in. There was just a swarm of people everywhere with all their luggage. They were all other associates that were checking in. It's a convention of about, I think at the time there were about 12,000 people. So it's in Canada and the US, so all kinds of people from all different walks of life descend onto the MGM Grand for this convention. And not everyone stays at the MGM Grand, but everyone stays around in Las Vegas. So there were a lot of people checking in. We got to our room. We just kind of relaxed for a little while and then walked around, got lunch, and then later got dinner.
You said our room. What was the accommodations? Were you sharing it with these two ladies?
Yes.
Okay.
I
And
think her mom was also, I can't remember, I think there were four of us in the room.
okay. Now, did you get there on the day the convention began, or were you there earlier than the convention?
The convention is on a Friday and Saturday, and we showed up on Wednesday night.
Okay. And what, to your understanding anyway, what were you to do at convention? Were you attending classes, attending meetings? What was your purpose in being there?
I didn't understand, I didn't know what to expect. I'd never been there before. She just told me it's going to be a great event. It's going to get you fired up. I had never attended a convention, not that convention, so I didn't really know what to expect.
Okay. And how long were you going to be there?
Well, we were going to leave Sunday, so 5 days total.
Okay. Is that when the convention ended?
No, my understanding was that it went all day Friday, all day Saturday. And there were smaller team events outside of those.
Okay. And was there a particular team that you were to be involved with at this convention?
Michelle was on Team Freedom, so when she recruited me, that made me part of Team Freedom. No, I'm sorry, I take that back. It was Team Renew. Sorry, there's a lot of different teams in the company. Team Renew, I think, was the name.
Okay. And tell us about what happened. You said you went in your room, you relaxed. What did you do next?
We just wandered around a little. We went out to the swimming pool. There were a lot of people there. I didn't bring a bathing suit. I didn't even think I was thinking business. So I felt, I don't know, it was 100 degrees and everyone was out in bikinis, hanging out, bathing suits, splashing around. So I felt awkward. I was just standing there in my business clothes. You know,
Okay.
I was getting introduced to a lot of people. I couldn't really keep track of everyone. There were a lot of names.
Okay. And you say you had another day before the convention started?
Yes, there was Thursday, and then on Friday was when the convention started.
So what did you do on Thursday?
On Thursday, Michelle, Lenore, and I just went, I don't remember the whole day, but I remember we got dinner at Applebee's across town. We just were having dinner. We just killed time just doing things, running around town.
Were you meeting more associates though as well?
Yeah, before we left the MGM Grand, we walked around and met more people, and I was introduced to more people that she knew.
So there weren't any meetings or anything on Thursday, is that right?
I wasn't aware of any, but later in that evening, I learned that there was a banquet that occurs the night before convention, and that's the executive director banquet.
While you were at this convention, did you ever meet an individual by the name of Travis Alexander?
Yes.
Describe for us where you were and what was going on when you met Travis Alexander.
On Wednesday night, this would be early September 2006, Michelle, Lenore, and I were with her mother and I think 2 other associates, and we were all sitting around this round table at the Rainforest Cafe, which is inside the casino and the hotel. We were having dinner, and we were finishing up dinner, paid our check, and we left. We didn't leave the Rainforest Cafe. We sort of stayed in this kind of lobby area. I don't know how else to. We were right outside the entrance, still indoors. And there's just tons of people everywhere. A lot of them are prepaid legal business associates. So I'm staying close to Michelle. She's the only person I really know. And I'm meeting other people that are on my team, and she introduces me to people that are in my upline and things like that. And there was just a crowd of people everywhere. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw somebody walking toward me, kind of fast-paced. And I noticed it was a guy, and I thought he was going somewhere because he looked like he had a purpose. So I stepped out of the way because I thought he needed to walk past me. But he stopped right in front of me and stuck his hand out and introduced himself.
And was that Travis?
Yes.
What happened from that point in time?
I shook his hand and tried to just log the name because there were a lot of people that I was meeting that weekend. So we just kind of milled around the outside of the Rainforest Cafe a little longer, and then our group began to wander throughout the casino, just past restaurants and sports bars and the slot machines and all that kind of thing.
And you say your group, does that mean the people you went to the restaurant with?
Yes.
And just so we're clear, Mr. Alexander wasn't part of the lunch you had, or dinner, excuse me, at the Rainforest Cafe?
No, he wasn't.
Did he then follow your group around the MGM?
He made it a point to walk with us. He was also on Team Renew, but more like laterally. He was obviously hired as an executive director as far as position in the company. But so he knew all these people. He had met them all before. But as we wandered throughout the casino, he made it a point to walk next to me and keep me engaged in conversation.
Okay. Was this late in the evening when this was going on, or?
It was dark out, I think, but I don't recall it being very late.
How did you part company with Mr. Alexander that evening?
Well, after wandering around, we kind of wandered back to the lobby where there's a big golden lion statue, and we took pictures there with some people. And then after a while, I kind of noticed that I had been ignoring everyone else in the group, and just he and I were talking. And at one point, there was a lull in the conversation, and it kind of felt like everyone was staring at us, so it was a little awkward. So I sort of began to talk to other people.
Okay.
And sorry.
No, go ahead, tell it. Keep
Okay.
going.
I don't remember how we parted, but just said goodbye, and Michelle, Lenore, and I went back to our hotel room. And I didn't really think anything of that meeting, but I think it was Lenore pointed out that she thought maybe he liked me, which made me think differently, I guess, about reflecting on our conversation, because I didn't get that vibe from him.
Right. Did you speak, after you parted company, did you speak to Mr. Alexander again that night?
Not that night, no.
When did you next speak to Mr. Alexander?
Well, while Lenore and Michelle and I were at Applebee's having dinner, Michelle's phone rang and she answered it, and I only heard her half of the conversation, and then she hung up and asked me and just told me that Travis wants to know if I would go to the executive director banquet with him.
And we heard a little bit about this earlier, but from your perspective, at least, perhaps I should say it this way, your perspective at the time, did you even know what an executive director's banquet was?
No, when Michelle mentioned it, that was the first I'd heard about it.
And what did you come to understand that it was?
Eventually, I came to understand that it's kind of it's a banquet where everyone dresses up. The women are dressed to the nines, the men are usually in tuxedos. It's kind of an upscale banquet with multiple courses. And generally there are speeches and things that other people give at the banquet while you're dining.
Okay. Now, once this invitation came to you, let me ask, were you in any way prepared to attend such a banquet?
No, I turned him down and said I didn't want to go because once I found out that it was, something where you have to dress up for, I didn't bring anything for that. So I said, thanks anyway. But no thanks, because we were on the other side of Las Vegas. The banquet started in less than an hour, and I just didn't see how I could get a dress, get back there, just rush hour traffic, all in that span of time, so.
And this would have been Thursday evening?
Yes, this was Thursday night.
Okay. Did you end up attending that banquet?
I did.
Explain to us how you went from the point in time when you said, I don't have anything to wear, it's across town, it's in an hour, to actually attending the banquet. How did that happen?
Well, after I said no, Michelle she encouraged me. She said it would be a very good experience for me. There are lots of executives that go that you should meet. I think her idea was to get me inspired to become more active in the company and get me more excited about the company. And both Lenore and Michelle were very encouraging, saying that you really should go. This is a very good opportunity. Not everyone gets this opportunity. So I kind of just said, okay, well, we got to find something for me to wear. So we ran around town. I think Kohl's was near Applebee's. I didn't know if there were any suitable dresses at that store, but we went in there, grabbed a few things off the rack, tried them on. Nothing was really working out. So I was thinking I was probably going to call him back. Well, actually, I did call him right before that and said, okay, I don't have a dress, but I'm going to look for one and I'll let you know. And so I was in the dressing room at Kohl's. By that point, he had my cell phone number. And so he called me and said,
Did you end up buying a dress at Kohl's?
no.
Did you end up obtaining a dress to wear to this banquet?
Yes, his friend packed an extra dress and she was the same size as me. And I guess she heard about his predicament and said that I could wear that dress.
Did you find it strange that Mr. Alexander was asking you to this banquet after only meeting him the day before?
I didn't really think of it as strange. I think the whole week was kind of strange. It wasn't really what I was accustomed to, so I was just going with the flow.
Okay. So tell us how you obtain this dress and what happens as you're going from Kohl's to the banquet.
After I realized there was a dress at the hotel, we dropped everything at Kohl's, hopped in the car and got on the freeway, and it was very slow traffic, but we just made it all the way back to the MGM Grand, and we rushed up to the hotel room where the dress was. I changed, and Travis met me there, met Michelle and I there, and we walked across the complex over to the ballroom where the banquet hall was being held. I'm sorry, where the banquet was being held, in the ballroom.
Whose dress was it that you were borrowing?
His friend's wife, Sky Hughes.
And had you known Miss Hughes prior to coming to her room and borrowing her dress?
No, I had not met her.
And you mentioned his friend Chris Hughes being Sky's husband. Had you met Chris Hughes prior to this event?
No.
When you went to, well, let me ask you this. Was Mr. Alexander there in the room when you changed and got ready?
I think he showed up. I was in the bathroom changing.
Tell us what this banquet was like for you.
It was nice. I was somewhat accustomed to that level of dining because of my serving experience, but I was always the server, not the guest. So, and I was very familiar with just how the courses run and, table etiquette and that sort of thing. So that was not really, it didn't move me a lot, but what was interesting was all of these people that were there and how successful they all were. And that kind of opened my eyes to the reality that you really can be successful in this company, and it's not just some fly-by-night company or any kind of get-rich-quick scheme or things like that.
Any kind of what was that?
Like a get-rich-quick scheme, that's not what it was.
Okay.
It was legitimate.
It sounds to me like then that you were, to some degree, getting intoxicated by the success you were seeing. Is that fair to say?
I don't know if intoxicated would quite be right, but it definitely made a big impression on me.
Impression how?
It stuck out in my mind. Travis also challenged me. He said, every person I take to the executive.
Here's
Okay.
Nobody approach that. Miss Arias, did people at this banquet encourage you to become more involved in prepaid legal?
Yes.
Was Mr. Alexander one of those individuals that encouraged you?
Yes, he encouraged me the most of everybody.
Tell us in terms of, you talked about the dining and things of that nature. Did you have any idea when you went to this banquet, or did you learn during the course of this banquet what an executive director meant in terms of income level?
I had an idea, there were people there giving they're called ring speeches. That means that they earned $100,000 within a 1-year period. So when you do that, you earn a ring to symbolize that or to, show that. So that's a huge milestone in the company that a lot of people strive for. Travis did not have his ring. He came close. At one point, he said he made almost 80 grand. Sorry.
I couldn't hear the last statements. Restate the question.
How,
Phone, oh. To your right. Thank you. You may proceed.
to your understanding, how did Mr. Alexander have the ability to invite you to this executive director's banquet?
He wouldn't have to be an executive director to have tickets. So that meant that he qualified for that position.
And to your understanding, what did qualifying to that position mean?
It meant that he had a certain level of production in the company as far as selling memberships. I believe that was my understanding of it.
Okay. But you also mentioned something about a ring. To your understanding at this banquet, was that something different than being an executive director?
Yes, because you can be an executive director and still not be earning $100,000 or actually anywhere near that, is my understanding now.
Okay. Did Mr. Alexander give a speech at this banquet?
No.
Did other people that he was with or people that he knew, did they make speeches at this banquet?
People made speeches and he may have known them, but I don't know what their relationship was to him.
The level of income of the people in the room, it seemed like from what Mr. Searcy told us, that was pretty well known. Is that correct?
Judge, you know, Mr. Searcy may have made that.
Restate the question.
Did you have an understanding, or was there any publications that talked about how much money these people were making?
Yes, some of the people are known to, well, you get a ring when you earn $100,000. When your income reaches $250,000, you get a diamond embedded in the ring. When your income reaches $500,000, you get 2 diamonds. And when your income reaches $1 million a year, you get 3 diamonds. So, and then there are people who earn beyond the $1 million mark. I don't know if there is any kind of outward symbol for that or not.
Okay. But you were learning this while you were present at this banquet, right? All these figures of these income figures, right?
Yes, people were mentioning their lifestyle in their speeches. That's incorporated their lifestyle, how things changed, how they struggled or how they're having success now, and they throw out numbers.
Did that speak to you in terms of your current situation? Or your situation as it relates to September 2006?
Yes.
Let's talk about that a little bit. What sorts of, in general, not specifically what they said, but what sort of statements did they make about the lifestyle in terms of with prepaid legal, how long it took to make money, those sort of things?
Their lifestyle, they no longer struggled, was the impression that I got. They no longer worried about paying the bills. They no longer worried about where their money would come from. They were more concerned with things of a higher nature, I guess you could say, like philanthropy, or who they could turn around and bless now that they've been blessed. And constructive ways they could now use their income to better society.
And that was something that also spoke to you?
Yes, very much.
After this banquet, what did you and Mr. Alexander stay together?
After the banquet, we left the banquet room, or it was like a big ballroom. And everyone sort of mills around outside and takes pictures with people. And so Travis took me around to a few different executives, and I got my picture taken with a bunch of people and him. And we just did that. And after that, I changed out of, well, we went back to the hotel room and I changed out of the dress and back into regular clothes.
Without telling me specifically what he said during this evening with Mr. Alexander, did you get the sense that he had a romantic interest in you?
Not really. He wasn't really flirting with me. He wasn't giving off that vibe. I did get the impression that he was trying to impress me because he was talking about income, and but he was talking to the guy next to him, but he was saying it very loud. So I got that impression, but not that he was trying to like woo me, if that makes sense.
Okay. During that evening, did you learn anything else about Mr. Alexander, where he lived, his family, his work history? Did you learn things like that about him?
He didn't talk about his family, but the night before he said he was from Riverside.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
That he was from Riverside.
Okay.
He told me he was a 49ers fan, which I kind of didn't believe because he was from Southern California and most people like the Chargers in that area. But it had to do with Steve Young. I guess it was a member of the church and a very good quarterback. He asked me about the UFC, if I was familiar with it. That was an interest he had, and I was familiar with it somewhat.
And UFC, is that an acronym for something?
Yes, it's an acronym for Ultimate Fighting Championship.
And is that what we would call cage fighting?
Yes, cage fighting, no holds barred.
Okay. And it sounds like you mentioned the church. Did he convey his faith to you that evening?
Not that evening. We went to convention on Friday. He had invited me to sit down on the floor where the executive directors sit. Just a bunch of chairs set up, so it's closer to the stage instead of the stadium seating.
And just so we're clear, is this the day after the banquet, right?
Yes, this is the Friday morning. I had a ticket, which was several seats up. It was with Michelle. And I got a text message from him that said there's an open seat down here if you want to sit closer to the stage.
Okay. And from your understanding, this would be an area, sounded like what you were telling us, is an area that you wouldn't otherwise be able to sit. Is that?
Yes, you needed a special pass to get into that area.
Okay. And do you know why?
It's reserved for executive directors only, so you have to be qualified for that position in order to get into that area.
Okay. And I'm sorry, what did you call this? You said it was a meeting, or what was this event Friday
It
morning?
was, I guess I would call them sessions, like there's a morning session and an afternoon session.
Okay. And for those of us who haven't been to one of these sessions with prepaid legal, what does this involve? Was there a huge number of people?
Yes, it fills up. It's a big stadium. I don't know how big, maybe football size, maybe not quite that big, but it's pretty huge.
Well, just so we're clear, we're not talking the size of a football stadium, right?
No, but it holds it holds well over 10,000. I think it can hold like 15,000 people.
Okay. All right.
With the floors.
Okay, so please go on then.
So that was filling up. I decided to make my way down. I don't remember how I got there. I think he met me at the area and took me over to where the seat was. And I went and sat down there, and the event starts with the national anthem and then the Canadian national anthem because the company is in both countries. And then just different things get started. It's kind of mixed up. There's training, entertainment. So, I mean, it's not entertainment, but their speeches. I think they use the term entertainment because it's entertaining training. Do you know what I'm saying? It's entertaining training, I guess you could say. anyway, we just looked at these, I just watched these speeches and took notes in my journal and took pictures, that kind of thing.
What were this, and I'm not even going to try to repeat the word because I'm sure I'll butcher it, but this entertainment / training, what was that, from your perspective, designed to do?
It's designed to, well, you get more training. Sometimes there are new products that they roll out and they train on that. But at the same time, it is designed to not be boring also. It's something that you usually riveted to. There's a lot of note taking. Some people come out and just rally up the crowd. They're very good speakers. They have a lot of energy. The ring speeches that were heard at the night before are also set on stage again so that all the associates that were unable to attend the banquet also get to hear those speeches. They're generally very inspiring because they're success stories.
Okay. And is this meeting in this large facility, is this something that lasts all day?
Yes, we start, I don't remember the time, but we start somewhat mid to early morning, go to lunch, break for lunch, and then come back in the afternoon until late afternoon.
Okay. Did you have lunch with Mr. Alexander?
No, that day I didn't. I went to get sushi with Michelle.
Okay. When you go back to this meeting, do you then return your seat near Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Okay.
I think he invited me one more time, so then after that, I just stayed in that seat for the rest of the convention.
Did the entire convention, you said the rest of the convention, did the entire convention take place in this one large room?
Yes.
Okay. So you spent the entire 2 days sitting next to him at this convention?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have dinner with him that what would be, I guess, Friday night?
Not Friday night. No, we didn't.
Okay.
I don't really remember Friday night, actually.
Tell us about Saturday then.
Okay, Saturday I was again getting lunch with Michelle, and we started texting each other sort of back and forth. By this point, it was pretty clear that he liked me more than friends. He wasn't being overtly flirtatious, but he was being very friendly. And I decided that, well, Michelle had told him that I had a boyfriend.
Did you have a boyfriend at the time?
Yes, I was still with Daryl.
Did you know, to your understanding, was Mr. Alexander aware of the fact that you had a boyfriend?
Yes.
Overruled, you may answer.
Yes, he was aware.
And you were just telling us that you got a sense of Mr. Alexander having an interest in you that wasn't strictly business, right?
Yes.
And you mentioned you were getting that sense. What things did he do to give you that sense?
He was texting me after the banquet. He said really nice things. You're a great girl. Okay, sorry.
Not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted, just the fact of the listener.
Overruled, you may continue.
He was friendlier and friendlier, but not inappropriate. But after I learned that he already knew I had a boyfriend and he continued to act that way, I thought it would be, I thought I needed to pull him aside and tell him that I have a boyfriend so that he didn't get the wrong impression from me.
Okay. And did you do that?
Yes.
And when was that?
That was Saturday night. We did have dinner at the Rainforest Cafe again. The whole Team Renew met. They reserved the upper floor of the Rainforest Cafe. We all had dinner there and then hung out in the food court after that and just talked for a long time. And then we went, I texted him earlier and said, I'd like to talk to you later.
She's the declaring.
Rephrase the question.
What motivated you to, or I shouldn't say that, how did you arrange this conversation with Mr. Alexander?
I indicated that I would like to talk to him when the time was appropriate, alone, and he said, okay. So we were hanging out in the food court, and he asked me, do you want to go for a walk? And I said, I thought this would be my opportunity to talk to him, so we started going for a walk around the casino. It was very late. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning at that point, and we started wandering near the stores. They're all closed at that point, so there are plenty of people over in the casino area where all the slot machines are, but this end of the building was kind of empty. So as we walked, I explained to him that I had a boyfriend. And I told him I liked him, but I'm in a relationship. And I explained a little bit about the state of my relationship. I didn't go into a lot of detail. I just...
What do you mean by you explained to him the state of your relationship?
I didn't go into a lot of detail. I just said, I'm not sure where it's going, but he's my boyfriend. That's what I said. I mean, I'm monogamous, so I'm with Daryl. I'm not with anybody else.
Did he respond in any way to what you were saying?
He smiled, and he was aware that that's what I was, well, he assumed that's what I was going to talk to him about. And so at that point, it was clear, I thought, and I was able to relax a little more and just be friends. And so we found a park bench. It was kind of like a park bench against a wall at that end of the building, and we sat down and ended up talking for a few more hours, just about everything.
Did he end up commenting on the what you should do regarding your current relationship?
Yes.
Did he advise you that you shouldn't settle for what you were dealing with?
Objection, the hearsay.
Overruled. Can you answer yes or no?
Yes.
While you were out on this bench, was this outside or inside?
Indoors.
And you said the two of you sat and spoke for a couple hours.
Yes.
Did you talk about religion or faith during that period of time?
Yes, the topic did turn to religion.
Did he share with you his membership in the Mormon church?
Yes, I knew that he was Mormon at that point. Michelle said it as if to warn me, like it should be a warning. I didn't know what that meant because I wasn't familiar with the Mormon church. I didn't know, I just assumed it was another Christian denomination, like any other, and I didn't really, I mean, I'd heard about Mormonism over the years. Mormonism is the butt of a lot of jokes on South Park, and some people just seem very antagonistic toward Mormons. I didn't understand why.
You have a specific question.
Sustained.
Did you have concerns about being around Mr. Alexander because of his membership or practice of the Mormon faith?
No, not at all. Someone's religion wouldn't affect that at all.
Did he express a desire for you to learn more about his faith?
No, he implied it, but he didn't openly start proselytizing or anything.
Okay. During this conversation at the bench in the MGM, did he ever attempt to kiss you?
Not there on the bench, no.
But he did that night?
He leaned in very close as if he wanted to kiss me, and he was licking his lips and he was staring at my lips and like he wanted to kiss me, but he didn't.
And where did this occur?
On the elevator.
How close to you did he get?
Well, we got onto the elevator and
Objection beyond the scope. She was asked how close did he get?
Sustained.
How close did he get to you?
he got right in my face. I would say 4 inches, maybe 5.
Okay. And this wasn't forced based on the size of the elevator, right?
No, the elevator was empty. At one point, there was someone else that stepped on, but
Large elevator,
yes.
and he got within 4 inches of your face.
Objection as to the answer.
Overruled.
Yes, he put his,
Objection beyond the scope.
Sustained.
Once he got within 4 inches of your face, with his face, was that right?
yes.
What did he do?
He licked his lips and said, I wish you didn't have a boyfriend.
Objection, yes, ma'am.
Sustained.
Did you kiss him?
No,
Did he make contact with you? Physical contact?
yes.
How?
He put his arm around me when he walked me back to my hotel room.
When he walked you back to your hotel room,
Yes.
did he attempt to kiss you again?
No, it seemed very obvious to
Objection
me.
assumes that he attempted to kiss her the first time. She said he did not.
No, actually, that's not what you said.
Overruled. You may answer the question.
He made it very obvious that he wanted to kiss me, but he was restraining himself. It was very obvious restraint.
And did he attempt to invite himself into your hotel room?
No,
And did you still have roommates per se for the hotel room?
yes, Michelle and Lenore, and I believe her mom were inside sleeping at that hour.
And this would have been late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, right?
Yes,
Okay. Is this the last you see of Mr. Alexander when you're in Las Vegas?
no.
After that evening, when was the next time you saw him?
Sunday morning, they had what's called a breakout, and it was in a small theater near the MGM Grand, within walking distance. So that team, I think it was Team Renew, maybe a few other people not on that team were present. I saw him there. I didn't sit next to him. And then
Objection beyond the scope. She was asked what she saw.
Sustained.
Where was he when you saw him?
he was at the theater, and I was at the theater. And then he invited me to,
Objection beyond the scope.
What did he invite you to do?
he invited me to go to, it was a buffet of some kind back at the MGM, where he and a few other people were having breakfast.
Okay.
Or
Did
lunch.
you accept his invitation to have breakfast?
Yes,
And you said this was Mr. Alexander and other individuals, right?
yes.
Okay. Were these people you knew previous to this point in time, or were these more individuals you were meeting?
I believe I'd met them over the weekend. They were people on my team and in my upline.
Okay. The friends that you came with, you drove from California with, were they at this breakfast?
No,
Where were they, to your knowledge?
I don't know. I don't know where they went after the breakout.
Okay. This breakfast with Mr. Alexander, was that the last time you saw him?
No, well,
At the convention?
no. I
Okay,
stayed with him till he left, I think.
okay. And what did you do after breakfast, or did he leave right after breakfast?
We walked over to the front desk where he checked out, and we walked out to the front where there were valets, and he was loading stuff into the taxi and getting ready to go to the airport.
Were there arrangements made for you two to have contact with each other again? How did you leave things with Mr. Alexander?
Yeah, he indicated he would call me. I didn't really expect him to call me, but that's kind of where we left it. We hugged.
Did he attempt to kiss you before he got in the taxi?
No.
When did you leave the convention?
Michelle and Lenore and I checked out a few hours. We got lunch at the Rainforest Cafe again, and then we checked out after that.
Okay. And I presume you drove back to California?
Yes.
After you arrived back in California, you were still living in the home with Daryl, right?
Yes.
Was it back to work, or what did you do when you got back?
I did have to work. Just back in the same routine, except Travis began to call me.
At this point in time, when you came back to California, to Palm Desert specifically, did you still consider Daryl Brewer to be your boyfriend?
Yes.
Were you still sexually active with Mr. Brewer after you came back from the convention?
No.
Why not?
I don't recall specifically why. Oh, well, because we broke up, I guess that would be why.
Okay.
But we didn't have sex after convention. I remember that was, prior to that was the last time that we did.
Okay. Prior to the convention?
Yes.
And you talk about breaking up with Mr. Brewer. When did you do that?
Well, I got back from convention on Sunday, and I broke up with Daryl on Thursday of that week.
Why did you break up with Daryl after you came back from the convention?
The relationship was already, like I'd mentioned, was kind of fizzling. I loved him very much, but there was it wasn't going anywhere. At least we had different visions for our futures. Because it had been like that from day one, it took me 4.5 years to really just let it go because I really loved him. Also, on Wednesday night, I was invited to go out to some of Travis's friend's house. And I knew Travis would be there, and I didn't want to. I'm kind of like, I one guy at a time kind of person, so I didn't want to have anything overlapping, and I knew there was an interest with Travis, and I was beginning to sort of develop just the seeds of interest with Travis, and I didn't want to be in a relationship when I went there because I didn't want there to be anything hindering. I didn't want to feel guilty for flirting or sitting next to him or doing any of that. I wanted to be out of a relationship so that I could not cheat on anybody, if that makes sense.
Would it be correct to say that then, from what you're telling us, Mr. Alexander motivated you to break up with Daryl Brewer?
The things he said made a big impression on me. It wasn't just about relationships, it was about my whole life, my career, and the direction of my life. So it made me step back and take a look at where I stood and where I was going. So that was part of the reason.
You mentioned something that I think is interesting. You said you came back with a different vision of the future. You came back from the convention with a different vision of the future than when you left, right?
Yes.
Okay. Describe for us, if you could, what was your vision of the future before you went to this convention in September 2006?
It was kind of nebulous. It wasn't very clear. I just knew that I wanted to, basic things. I knew I wanted to have kids someday. I knew I wanted to be married someday. I knew I didn't want to struggle paycheck to paycheck. I didn't see myself living a life of excess, but definitely being able to pay the bills and provide for a family somewhat, or just at least be a joint contributor to the household. I saw myself getting more into photography, and hopefully I still had hopes of being successful in real estate eventually.
And when you come back from convention, what's your vision of the future?
I still had those desires, but leaving convention, I can't really describe it. It was painful, actually, because I knew that there was a lot of change on my horizon at that point. I couldn't continue with the same life that I had been living because it's kind of like my eyes were opened to a lot of things that I had been ignoring. And the idea of change was uncomfortable. I really loved Daryl, but I couldn't continue with him.
That sounds more about things on a personal level. Well, what about your vision for your future on a professional level? Were you believing, leaving this convention, that prepaid legal was going to make you rich?
The idea of selling the membership was uncomfortable to me. I believe in the product, but just hitting up my friends and family seemed awkward. So I had that desire, but I couldn't quite see myself going out and doing it, at least yet. So
Okay.
Michelle invited me to an event a week later, and it kind of reiterated some of the things I'd seen at convention, and I continued to go to these events. From then on, I became more active as far as plugging into those events and how to sell the membership and how to have success, and the general vision of it became more crystallized in my mind.
Was there a general point in time then when you decided that to, for lack of a better phrase, go all in prepaid legal in terms of your future?
I had periods in the company where I was very productive, and the money I made was surprising. I didn't realize the compensation plan was as generous as it was, and I liked that, but I found it difficult to maintain that level of production every month.
Were you still working other jobs?
Yes.
Did you eventually get to a point where prepaid legal was your only job?
No.
How much did you make in a year with prepaid legal in you say your most productive year?
I really didn't make anything for several months at a time, and then one month I made approximately $1,700, and the next month I made, I want to say, a little over $1,000. So those 2 months were really good.
How much time a week were you spending investing in your prepaid legal business?
Not nearly as much as I should have been. They have goals in the company, things that they'd like you to commit to, such as talking to other people about a minimum number of people per day or per week. And I don't remember them now because it's been so long, but just different. They're called 10 core commitments. At least that's what they were called then. And they tell you that if you just do these things systematically, then success follows.
How many hours a week were you working at the restaurant?
At that time, I was still full-time at Quisto, but eventually I quit that job. And then I only had one job.
Okay. You broke up with, I want to go back to this conversation you had with Daryl. Did you guys sit down and the two of you talk about the relationship?
Yes, I guess I wasn't as specific as I thought I had been. It sounded like he didn't have he didn't get that impression, but we sat down. I actually had a conversation with him. We sat at our kitchen table, and I just told him in essence, I told him, I know we're not getting married, but I'd like to have kids someday. And he said, okay. And I said, well, I think maybe we should, I might want to start pursuing that goal. And I know that you don't want to pursue that goal with me, and that's okay. I know he was moving back to Monterey. I said, I know you're moving back soon. So I kind of just left it at that. I don't think I was very specific, but he was nodding his head like he understood what I was saying. So I was under the impression that he understood that we were no longer together at that point. I mean, not in a committed relationship where we are boyfriend-girlfriend.
And you mentioned doing this prior to being invited to spend a weekend in California with Mr. Alexander, right?
I actually did it right after I was invited, but prior to going.
Okay. Prior to you going to California, or prior to this breakup, had you had any other interaction with any officials from the Mormon Church in your home?
Not at that point.
So tell us about when was it? When was this trip to California or somewhere else in California to take place?
This would have been the weekend after convention.
And where was it? How many hours from you was it?
I don't remember the drive, not far. It was in Murrieta, California, either Murrieta or Temecula, I think Murrieta. And I'd say an hour and 15 minutes maybe on the drive.
And whose home were you going to?
I was going to Travis's friends, and their names are Chris and Sky.
Is that Chris and Sky Hughes where the dress came from?
Yes.
As it relates to, at this point in time, did you have an understanding where Mr. Alexander lived?
Yes, I knew he lived in Mesa.
Okay. Did you feel comfortable going to Murrieta to spend this, I guess it was a couple days, in this home of people you barely knew?
I had met the Hugheses at convention, and they seemed like very nice people. So I was a little uncomfortable, but not in a bad way, just shy. But I didn't feel unsafe or anything like that. I just, there was going to be a party there. I believe Mr. Hughes' brothers were moving to Colorado, so it was sort of a going away party, and Sky's brother also returned from his mission. So it was kind of and then all the prepaid legal associates were there, so it was kind of a party with multiple purposes. We were all just there gathering. It's like a social gathering.
Was it your understanding, you said a social gathering, were you there as one of the party guests per se, or were you there as Travis's date?
Just a party guest.
Did you spend a lot of time with Travis over those few days?
Not at first. I got there while the party was in progress and hung out for a while. Michelle was there, so I felt comfortable a little bit, and eventually she left. It had been discussed ahead of time that, and this was on a Saturday, this party, that I could stay the night. They had an extra bedroom, and they wanted me to attend church with them in the morning. So I agreed to that, and Travis actually wasn't there at the party. He was late, and he showed up after almost everyone had left.
Did you spend time what would have been Saturday evening before church? Did you spend time with Mr. Alexander on Saturday evening?
Yes.
Was it just the two of you, or were there other people involved?
At first it was Travis and I. We were sitting on an oversized chair, and Chris and Sky and one other guy named Jeff. I can't remember his last name at this point. We were all sitting in the living room watching a funny video that Travis had made or filmed.
At this point in time, had you kissed Mr. Alexander?
No.
When did you first kiss Mr. Alexander?
We all went to bed, and he came into the bedroom I was staying in. I assumed there was probably going to be some kissing or some kind of talking or hanging out. We had talked every night that entire week. So that's when we kissed.
I want to clarify too as well. You just said something. You said you talked to Mr. Alexander every night. What time period are you referring to?
The time from the Monday after convention till Friday night, because he showed up Saturday.
So he called you after convention every single night?
Yes,
Judge
that,
Anderson's back on that, she didn't say, he called and they talked.
Rephrase.
How did you and Mr. Alexander wind up communicating all these nights between convention and his invitation to you?
well, I was at my home in Palm Desert, and he was at his home in Mesa, so he called.
Did he call you on your cell phone or a home phone, or
My
do you
cell phone.
recall? Okay. And about what time of the day, if there was a consistent time of the day, was he calling you?
The first night he called around 8 o'clock, and then toward the end of the week, it began to get a little bit later, not inappropriate late, maybe just 9:30, a little closer to 10. He learned my schedule, and I usually worked in the afternoons, so it wasn't a big deal that he called that late.
What was he calling about?
We just talked mostly about, well, he told me a lot about himself and his dog, his religion, his mission, his friends. He had lots of funny stories he would share, and he wanted to know about me. He wanted to know about Daryl. He wanted to know just different things about my life.
These conversations you had with him over these days after the convention, is that part of what you meant by his words encouraging you to break up with Daryl Brewer?
Will you say that again? I'm sorry.
You talked about how some of the things that Travis said to you encouraged you to break up with Daryl Brewer,
Yes.
right? These things that he said to you that encouraged you to break up with Daryl Brewer, were some of these things said during these phone calls he was making to you?
Yes, just encouraging me to never settle for mediocrity was really what it centered on, relationships, careers, anything. Also, when he found out Daryl's age, he was making fun of him.
What do you mean making fun of him?
Just that I was dating grandpa, things like that. You know, just little jokes. And I mean, I didn't really find it funny, but I didn't get overly offended or anything. I just said he's not like that. You know, I described him as handsome and, you know, like that.
Okay. What at this point in time was it about Mr. Alexander that encouraged you or helped maybe push you over the edge, so to speak, to break up with Daryl?
But like I said, some of the things he said helped me to gain a different perspective and step back and take a look at my life. And I realized things weren't going anywhere. If it probably weren't for Travis, I may have just continued on like that until Daryl moved, and who knows. But knowing that I wanted to hang out with Travis that weekend, and I didn't want to, I've always been faithful in my relationships, and I didn't want to change that now. So I decided to break things off with Daryl so that I was just free to hang out with Travis without, you know, feeling guilty that I was sitting next to him, or if it led to kissing or something like that. It wouldn't be something that I would feel bad about.
We're going to take the afternoon recess at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, please be back in the jury room by 3:30, and we will start promptly at that time. Please remember the admonition. You are excused.
Please stand for the jury.
Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Mr. Nerma, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Arias, before the break, we were talking about this weekend you were spending with Travis and his friends, Chris and Sky Hughes. And specifically, you were talking about the first time you kissed Mr. Alexander. And that was, to my understanding, that was in the room that you were in at the Hughes home. Is that right?
Yes, the bedroom that I was assigned.
Okay. Tell us, you mentioned him coming over, but just kind of describe for us, him coming to your room, just kind of describe for us what happened. Did he knock on the door? Did he walk in? Just kind of walk us through that.
Before going to bed, he said, I'll come in there in a little bit after they after they shut their door and go into their bedroom and go to sleep. I guess, I don't know. Well, he wanted to wait until they were in their bedroom. So I left the door cracked because I figured we were just gonna.
All right, Ms. Arias, some of the jurors are having difficulty hearing you.
Oh, sorry. I'll try to speak up. He came into my room at that point, and we started kissing. We sat down on the bed and started kissing. And
Was there conversation first, or did he just come in and start kissing you?
there was no conversation. I thought there was going to be, but there was no conversation.
Sustained.
Did you anticipate that his sole purpose of coming in the room was to kiss you?
Not his sole purpose, but I had a pretty good idea that it might lead to that.
The word kiss or kissing could be taken a whole bunch of different ways. Could relate to a simple peck on the cheek to something much more intimate. Could you describe for us the way that he was kissing you?
Yeah, it was more passionate. It wasn't just regular kissing. It was passionate, like French kissing.
Okay. Was he touching you?
Yeah, I don't really recall the specifics, but we were getting intimate. We were making out, basically.
And what do you mean by intimate? That could also mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So describe for us what you mean by you're getting intimate.
Well, at that point, we were laying on the bed. We were side by side, facing each other, kissing. That's what I mean by intimate at that point.
Was he touching any particular parts of your body, or were you just kissing?
I don't really recall that at first. It began to lead to more.
And what do you mean by more?
Well, I don't really recall how it happened, but he began to remove my clothes.
And do you recall what you were wearing when he began to remove your clothes?
I was in pajamas of some kind, I think sweats and a t-shirt.
Okay. And him taking off your clothes, was that something you were expecting to take place?
No, I thought we were going to kiss, and maybe heavily, but that would be the extent of it, since this was the first time we were kissing.
When he began to remove your clothing, was that then surprising to you?
It was, well, yeah, it was a little surprising, but it was more, I felt apprehensive, but I was going with it.
What do you mean you felt apprehensive?
Well, I wasn't expecting that, so I didn't want to tell him no, so I just kept going with it.
Why didn't you want to tell him no?
I didn't want to do anything that would maybe displease him, not because I feared like he would get angry or anything, but I didn't want him to feel rejected, and I didn't want him to get his feelings hurt, or I didn't want to spoil the mood, sort of like that. We were getting along, we had some kind of chemistry. I just didn't want to like snuff it out right then by saying stop, I guess. That was my thought.
Why would rejecting him at that point in time be such a big deal to you?
At that point in time, I was not really accustomed to saying no. I have a lot more backbone now than I used to. It was hard for me to tell somebody no. So even though it was uncomfortable, I just kept going with it.
So the discomfort you were feeling in having your clothes removed was less burdensome to you than the discomfort you would feel saying no. Is that what we're hearing?
Overruled.
I can't really say one way or another because I wouldn't know because I couldn't make the comparison, but at the time it felt more uncomfortable to push him off of me or something. I mean, he wasn't aggressive, but he was definitely doing the initiating at that point, and I just kept going for it.
Did he, on this occasion, wind up removing your clothes?
Yes.
All your clothes?
Yes.
At this point in time, was Mr. Alexander dressed?
Yes.
Did that change?
Not really. I think he kept his garments on that he was wearing.
And you say garments. What are you referring to?
Garments they're called temple garments, and it's like a t-shirt and underwear, kind of like briefs. They're sort of an off-white color.
Is that what he came in wearing, or just those, or was he wearing other things?
No, he had his temple garments on under, I think, sweats. I don't remember if he had just the shirt, but I think he was wearing pajamas over those.
And whatever else he was wearing over his garments, did he take those items off, or did you?
I don't recall. I know I didn't.
Okay.
It might have been a joint effort, but I didn't solely remove them or anything like that. I don't really remember.
So after you are undressed and Mr. Alexander is in his undergarments, what happened?
This is embarrassing.
Room check, she's asked what happened. Not working.
Sustained.
Is it embarrassing for you to talk about this?
Objection not.
Overruled.
Yes.
I understand how it might be, but it's important to share this with us. So if you could, please tell us what happened next.
He began to perform oral sex on me.
And was this comfortable? You mentioned earlier that you had a certain level of discomfort with this act, the being naked. Were you uncomfortable while this oral sex was going on?
I was uncomfortable. It was dark. I mean, the lights were off, so like that might have made it a little bit more, a little more tolerable. But it was I don't know, I mean, he knew what he was doing for sure, but it was just, it felt like too much too soon, and I mean, I couldn't exactly rewind at that point, you know?
Why not? Did you voice your displeasure with the events?
No, I can't say that it was displeasure, but it was uncomfortable. Does that make
Okay,
sense?
well, let me rephrase my question then. Did you voice your discomfort to him?
No, I didn't want to give him that
Jackie,
impression.
there was,
Why not?
Sustained.
Why not, Ms. Arias?
Why not? What? I'm sorry.
Why didn't you voice your discomfort?
I didn't want him to have that impression. I wanted to at least appear like I was enjoying it as much as he seemed to be.
So you were attempting to give him the impression that you were enjoying things.
Yes.
And why were you interested in doing that?
I guess it would have seemed to me to be unattractive for me to say anything different or anything negative about the experience.
Okay. What happened after he performed oral sex upon you?
He asked for reciprocation.
And how did that request make you feel?
At that point, I had taken it that far. I was kind of glad he was done, and I was just willing to reciprocate at that point.
And so we're clear when you say reciprocate, does that mean perform oral sex upon him?
Yes.
And did he remove his garments at that time, or how did that occur?
I don't know if the garments at the bottom came all the way off or just pushed down. The shirt remained on, and yeah.
And yeah, what?
Yeah, I don't remember what happened with the bottom. I think they obviously came down some. I don't know if they came all the way off or not. I can't remember.
Okay. Did you perform oral sex upon him at that time?
Yes.
Did he ejaculate?
Yes.
Where?
In my mouth.
What happened after he ejaculated?
I think we fell asleep. I don't recall getting dressed again. I don't even recall getting with blankets, but when I woke up, we were both covered with blankets.
Okay. You were both in the same bedroom on your bed.
Yes.
And were you dressed?
When I woke up, not initially, but I put my pajamas back on.
What happened next?
I don't remember what time I woke up, but it was before everyone else did. I remember falling asleep. I think he might have woken up because I woke up and he got dressed and left the room.
And from what you told us earlier, this incident occurred Saturday night, and the next morning would have been Sunday morning, the day you were to go to church. Is that correct?
Yes.
What happened from that point in time on?
Do you mean that morning?
Yes. When you were telling us how he eventually got dressed and left your bedroom. What happened from that point?
Basically, the rest of the household began to wake up. I hadn't been to church since I was about 11, so I didn't really have church clothes. I bought 2 dresses before heading out there. I asked Sky which one would be more appropriate, So then I put on an outfit, and the rest of the household was getting ready for church. And then we took separate cars. I took my car. I think Travis rode with me on that one over. And can't remember who else rode with me. Maybe it was Jeff. And the Hugheses took their own vehicle.
And what was the service like? Was there a particular subject matter of the service that day?
I don't recall exactly what was said, but I do remember that one of the speakers was Sky's brother, Zion, who had just gotten back from his mission. So he was giving a talk related to maybe something related. I don't remember the topic.
Something related to what?
It would have been related to his topic, but because when you speak in church, you're given a topic to talk about, and I don't recall what the subject matter was, but he was speaking from the podium.
Prior to going to church, did you and Mr. Alexander speak about this incident the night before?
No.
Did you speak about the incident that day after church?
No.
What happened after the church services?
We had the church service, and I rode back. Well, I drove back in my car. Travis rode shotgun. Jeff was behind me, and Sky was behind Travis. We were driving back, and she found in the back of my seat, she found a portfolio of my photography, and she was flipping through it. And there was a photograph of Daryl in that photo that I had taken a headshot of him kind of growling at the camera. He looked gruff, and he was unshaven, and it was in black and white. It looked really cool, and she showed it to Travis. So that was the first time Travis saw Daryl. So that was, I don't know, I kind of lost track of the question, I'm sorry.
Okay. Before you left, I assume from what you were telling us before that you left the Hughes' home on Sunday, that Sunday, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
Before leaving, by leaving the Hughes' home, you were going to return to Palm Desert, right?
Yes.
Okay. Were you ever alone with Mr. Alexander prior to you leaving the home? From the time you went to church to the time you left the home, were the two of you ever alone together?
Not that I recall. Everyone was home.
So you didn't have a chance to speak about this incident with him then, is that correct?
I may have had an opportunity if I'd wanted to pull him aside, but it was not discussed.
When you left the home, how did you and Travis part ways? Were you expecting to call each other, or what was the...
He walked me out to my car and kissed me, and I got in the car and drove off.
Back to Palm Desert?
Yeah, I stopped and got gas, and I think I went to Starbucks, and then I went back to
Okay.
Palm Desert.
All right. When did you next hear from Mr. Alexander?
I would say it would either have been that night or Monday night.
And how did you, what was the means that you conducted or contacted Mr. Alexander? Did he call you? Was it in person?
We were calling each other back and forth at that point, so I don't remember who called who. But it was over the phone.
Okay. When you spoke, was there conversation related to this incident that evening?
There may have been some reference to it, but we mostly talked about church, and he wanted to know how I liked it.
Okay. At this point in time, when you returned from Palm Desert, you've been to church. Have any religious officials from the Mormon Church contacted you at this point in time?
No, not yet.
When did that occur?
Well, Travis gave me a Book of Mormon on Wednesday, and I think around that same time he contacted the church, and I don't know how it works, but he gave them my information so that some missionaries in that area could come to my house.
You mentioned Travis gave you a Book of Mormon on Wednesday. Was this the Wednesday following the Sunday that you left the Hugheses?
Yes.
And where did you see Mr. Alexander on Wednesday?
He was leaving Riverside and driving back to Mesa, and Palm Desert is on that stretch. It's on the I-10. And he called me on the way and wanted to meet with me so that he could give me a copy of the Book of Mormon. And I agreed to meet with him. I didn't really know where we could meet though, because Daryl was home and I didn't want to bring some guy over.
So where did you wind up meeting Mr.
We
Alexander?
ended up meeting at a Starbucks, which was near my house.
Okay. And is this where he gave you the Book of Mormon?
Yes.
Did you have a conversation at this Starbucks?
Yes.
And what was the subject matter of this conversation?
He didn't give me the Book of Mormon right away. He had Napoleon with him, which was his dog. He's a black pug on a leash. And I don't remember where Napoleon was, but we went inside the store to get drinks.
That's another response, because that was the subject.
Sorry.
Sustained.
Okay. You're in the Starbucks, he has his dog with him. What is the subject matter of the conversation inside the Starbucks?
The word of wisdom, but we were sitting outside in the
Okay.
shade. It was a little hot, but it was still it was cooler in the shade.
Okay. So you were at the Starbucks, just sitting outside. You were talking about the word of wisdom, right?
Yes.
Okay. And for those of us who are not familiar, what is to your understanding at that point in time, what is the word of wisdom?
The word of wisdom is LDS doctrine that states it prohibits the consumption of coffee, tea, alcohol, tobacco, and illegal drugs.
Do those same words relate to the vow of chastity, or is that something completely different?
The law of chastity is different from the word of wisdom.
Okay.
There are two separate commandments.
After the two of you were at Starbucks, outside, what happens next?
Well, we discussed the word of wisdom a little more because he was drinking chai iced tea, but he said that doesn't count. And I asked him why, and he explained his reasons. I was drinking a latte, an iced latte. And so as our conversation progressed, it sort of moved into a more, I don't know how to explain it, but basically he expressed that he was horny, is what he said.
Okay. And once he made this expression, did you remain at the Starbucks or did you go elsewhere?
Well, he said, I wish there was somewhere we could go, and I said, I'm sorry.
Sustained.
We both were trying to figure out a place where we could go. So I don't know why, but I was wanting to go with him also to find some place. So we went in our respective cars. We drove to a park near Starbucks. It was between my house and Starbucks, and it was the middle of a school day, so nobody was there. There was a parking lot there, and we pulled up into the parking lot, and he left Napoleon in the car with the air conditioner on and the windows rolled up, and he came into my car and sat in the passenger seat.
And after he sat in the passenger seat, you mentioned that he expressed that he was, to use your words, horny, right?
Yes.
What was the point of him getting in your car at the park, to your understanding?
I didn't know at first. I mean, my car was very,
Objection, non-responsive. She knows the point.
I did not know the point of that.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't know what he was expecting.
Ms. Arias, wait for the question.
I apologize.
When he got in the car, did he voice or convey an interest in engaging in some sort of sexual activity with you in the car?
Yes.
What sort of activity, to your understanding, was he interested in?
Oral sex.
And so we're clear, was that oral sex that you were to be performing on him or him performing on you?
He wanted to receive it.
Did you comply?
Yes.
Why?
I felt an attraction to him, and the feeling was mutual, and I just wanted to, I don't know, I wanted to do what he wanted to do.
You wanted to do what he wanted to do.
Yes.
Objection, the
I- Why?
I liked him.
Prior to, in between the first incident and the home of Chris and Sky Hughes, where oral sex took place, and the time that you were in the park, you had conversed with Mr. Alexander a few times, correct?
Yes.
During those conversations, did you ever voice your discomfort about what happened that Saturday night in the Hughes home?
No, I didn't.
Did oral sex take place in your car?
Yes.
Did he ejaculate?
Yes.
Where?
I don't remember, actually.
Okay. After he ejaculated, what happened from that point on?
He fixed the visor mirror and pulled his pants back up.
What do you mean he fixed the visor mirror?
He had it flipped. Well, when I started, he flipped the visor down and angled the mirror. I guess he did.
When you started what?
Oral sex.
What happened then after he fixed the mirror? Did you guys hang out for a longer, go to the park? What did you do?
No, I guess I was under the impression that we were,
objection, non-responsive. What did you do?
Sustained.
What did you do? What happened?
we parted ways.
What's that?
We parted ways.
Immediately? Within minutes?
Yes.
How did you feel after that encounter?
I don't recall feeling really bad. maybe just a little deflated. He refused to kiss me afterward because he said it was gross. Maybe that's because I was just performing oral sex, but that's what he said. And so he kissed me on the cheek and left.
And I know this might be hard for you, but I kind of want you to address my question. How did you feel afterwards?
That's an answer, improper question as to how counsel could possibly know how she feels.
Approach, please.
After Mr. Alexander departed, how did you feel about the fact that you had just performed oral sex upon him?
I felt a little disappointed with myself, but it's hard to describe. Like, I was attracted to him, he was attracted to me. He obviously derived a lot of pleasure from that, so that I took as a good sign. But again, I was just thinking it was a little bit too much too soon. I've been intimate before, but not that quickly.
So you were disappointed in yourself being that intimate that early on in your relationship?
Yeah, it wasn't so much the intimacy, but the rapidness, the timing, I guess you could say. I'd been with Daryl 4.5 years, so he was the only person I'd known for that time. So this was somewhat foreign, but just, but it was, but it wasn't, if that makes sense.
Okay. To clarify too, at this point in time, this encounter in the park, were you in love with Mr. Alexander?
No.
After he departed, what did you do?
I drove home and got ready for work. He left me a voicemail
Okay. On your cell phone or on a home phone?
on my cell phone.
Okay. And what was the subject matter of that voicemail?
He was expressing his thoughts.
Objection, hearsay, what was the subject matter?
I'm not sure how to answer that question. The incident, I guess, would be the subject matter.
Question before her.
When you're talking about the subject matter was the oral sex that just took place?
Objection needed.
Yes or no?
Yes, I guess.
And if you can characterize it, was he expressing happiness, gratitude about the event?
I wouldn't characterize it that way.
How would you characterize it?
I'm not sure how.
How would you characterize it?
I would say that he was I'm trying to think how to characterize it without saying what he said.
Well, let me ask you this. Did he voice displeasure with what took place?
He voiced displeasure with himself.
Okay. Was that related to the fact that this incident took place, or how he treated you?
Both.
Okay. You received this voicemail before you went to work that day, right?
I think I received it while I was working.
Okay. Do you recall, were you working an evening shift, or do you recall what hours you were working?
I was working afternoon, evening.
And at this point in time, you were living a home in the Palm Desert home by yourself. Is that right?
Daryl was still there. We're in separate bedrooms at all times at that point.
Okay. Were you and Daryl at a place where you were friends, friendly, or was it a caustic environment?
It was not caustic. It was friendly, just no longer intimate.
Okay. Did you wind up speaking, when was the next time after this incident in the car that you wound up speaking to Mr. Alexander?
It would have either been that night or the following night.
You mentioned a voicemail where he was somewhat, I guess, apologetic for how he treated you and what took place. Did you ever...
Objection leading to facts not evidence. That's not what you said.
She just testified that that's exactly what he's expressed.
Finish your question.
Were you given the opportunity to, or I should say this way, did you ever take advantage of the opportunity to express your displeasure or discomfort with what had been taking place sexually in your relationship?
Yes, somewhat.
What do you mean by somewhat?
I sent him a response in response to his voicemail.
Okay.
I sent him an email.
Okay. After this encounter in the car, are you still speaking with Mr. Alexander? How frequently are you speaking to Mr. Alexander?
Almost every night.
And are these quick conversations or these extensive conversations?
These are long conversations, hours.
Are these conversations, I understand that each one's probably somewhat unique, but were they spiritual in nature?
Yes, they were spiritual.
Were they sexual in nature?
Yes. Flirty, I'd say.
Okay. Flirty?
Yes.
Okay. And when was the next time, and Mr. Alexander, to your understanding, was still living in Mesa, right?
Yes.
When was the next point in time that you saw Mr. Alexander?
It would have been in October
October of
2006.
2006. Okay. And when did this meeting take place?
I don't remember the exact date. There are photos
Okay.
with the dates,
Well,
but
let me ask you this. Where did this meeting take place?
we met up in Ehrenberg. I think it's in California, technically.
Okay.
It's right on the border.
I'm sorry, what was that?
It's right on the border
Of,
of California and Arizona.
okay. And how much later was this meeting? Was this weeks later, days later, when you met in Ehrenberg from the incident in the park in your car?
I would say it was about a month later.
Okay. So you didn't physically see him for about a month, but you spoke every day on the phone?
Yes,
nearly every
almost every day.
Okay. And as a result of those conversations, well, let me ask you this, because we talked about some Mormon officials coming to your home. Did that begin after this incident of oral sex in the park?
Yes,
But was that also before you went to Ehrenberg?
yes.
Okay. What were these, I say Mormon officials, but are these what we would call missionaries?
Yes.
How often would these missionaries come to your home?
I think they came on average 2 times a week.
And what went on when they came to your home?
The first time they came, I think they had made an appointment. They invited me to church every week. They have a system in the Mormon church when you're introducing somebody to the church for the first time. They're called discussions, and there's a discussion you take first, and then second, third, and on, which sort of introduces you to the church, how it was founded, truths that they believe in.
Okay. Let me ask you, as part of this, these meetings and this process, these meetings you were having with the missionaries, and I brought up earlier the vow of chastity. Did they speak to you about that?
No, not that I recall.
Okay. When did you learn of the vow of chastity, to your recollection?
I think actually prior to my baptism, those things were briefly explained to me. They're young men, so they didn't really get into detail.
Okay. So, from your perspective, since you've been there, describe for us Ehrenberg. Is this a big town? Was there a particular reason why you were going there? What was the point of meeting in Ehrenberg?
Yes, the point was so we could spend time together, and it was a halfway point, so he didn't have to drive all the way to California, because he hadn't planned to come out to California until the following month, and I'd never been to Arizona, so I wasn't even thinking of going to Arizona, but Ehrenberg was about halfway.
Okay. And what was the plan? What were you, from your impression, what were you going to do in Ehrenberg?
We were going to hang out, and we'd talked extensively over the month, so I thought there would be more conversation, probably some intimacy that was hinted at heavily, so that was expected.
What do you mean the intimacy was heavily hinted at? Without telling me what he said, did he express a desire to be intimate with you again?
Yes.
I'm a little confused because it seemed like you had talked to us before about, after this incident in the park, how Mr. Alexander had expressed some misgivings about what happened. Did he express those misgivings before meeting you in Ehrenberg?
No, after that,
Objection.
those,
That's a question.
She hasn't even got a word out of her mouth.
Said no.
Ask another question.
You were going to Ehrenberg with the idea that, at least partially, that some intimate encounters might take place.
yes,
And Mr. Alexander never expressed any misgivings about those encounters occurring.
no,
Right.
that was kind of the purpose of the trip.
Okay. And by intimate encounters, what, to your understanding, were you expecting, at least from the sexually speaking?
Maybe more of the same as before, but nothing further than that. And that's kind of pretty far, but nothing beyond that.
Okay, so at this point in time, based on what you told us, it's our understanding that you had not had penile vaginal intercourse with Mr. Alexander.
No.
Is that correct? Okay. And it would also be our understanding that you had not had anal sexual intercourse with Mr. Alexander. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Tell us about Ehrenberg. Did you share one hotel room or did you each have your own room?
We had one motel room.
Okay. And when did you arrive in Ehrenberg?
I got there later than him because I had to work, and so I arrived late at night. And
Okay. Was this Friday night? Was this Saturday night?
I think it was either Thursday or Friday night. I don't remember my exact schedule, but
Well, let me ask you this. How many nights were you to spend in Ehrenberg?
2.
Okay. Tell us what happened when you arrived.
When I arrived, he when I arrived, he came to the door and let me in, and then brought me over to bed, and we just started kissing.
Okay. I assume then that he was already in the room.
Yes, he got the room.
Okay. You said you started kissing. Was there conversation first, or did it immediately lead to kissing?
No, we had some conversation over the phone on the way there.
Okay.
So when I arrived, it was physical right away.
Okay. And we talked earlier, I mentioned earlier how kissing could mean different things. Could be the friendly to the passionate. What sort of kissing was this?
Passionate.
Was he attempting to remove your clothing?
Yes, we both were taking off our clothes, I think.
Okay. At this point in time, was this level of intimacy something that you felt comfortable with?
At this point, I was a little more comfortable with it because we had been talking for a long time, and I felt like I knew him better. And also, I don't think I was as nervous because it wasn't the first time that we were like that.
Okay. In your mind, was this supposed to be a romantic weekend, if you will?
Yes,
Did it turn out to be that?
not too much romance. It wasn't everything I was expecting, but I didn't have high expectations. But we didn't connect really like we did on the phone.
Judge, do we want to?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow morning, 10:30 a.m., please remember the admonition. For your planning purposes, we will not have court this Thursday. You will be here tomorrow, Wednesday, but no court on Thursday. Have a nice evening. You aren't excused.